What do you even know about hard work? He sneered. Look at you. She looked up, calm and steady. More than you'll ever understand. It was a bright, crisp morning in downtown Manhattan. The kind of day that makes the city feel alive, sunlight reflecting off the tall glass buildings, the soft hum of traffic mixing with distant sirens, and people rushing past with coffee cups in hand and phones glued to their ears. Outside a luxury coffee shop on the corner of Lexington Avenue, a man sat alone at a patio table. He looked like money. Clean navy blue suit, crisp white shirt, no tie, just the right amount of relaxed authority. On his wrist sat a gold Rolex, and across the street, his sleek black Tesla Model S waited in a reserved VIP parking space. His name was Evan Caldwell. 42 years old, CEO of a tech company you've probably never heard of, but one that had made him millions. He didn't like attention, unless it was admiration. Power was his oxygen. Success was his identity. Evan was sipping his cappuccino and scrolling through stock alerts on his phone when he noticed her. She stood just a few feet away, on the sidewalk. A woman in a baggy, torn gray coat, worn-out jeans, and a knit hat that had clearly seen better days. Her face was sun-kissed, but not in a healthy way, more like she had been out in the elements far too long. She held a cardboard sign that read, "Anything helps. God bless." She wasn't loud. She wasn't aggressive. She just stood there quietly, her eyes scanning people as they passed by. Most ignored her. A few glanced and then looked away quickly, uncomfortable. Evan, however, was annoyed. He lowered his sunglasses, looked her up and down, and shook his head in disbelief. With a voice loud enough for everyone on the patio to hear, he said, "Seriously? This is where you choose to stand?" The woman didn't react. She didn't move. She kept holding her sign. Evan leaned back in his chair, making a show of looking disgusted. "Hey, maybe if you got a job instead of begging, you wouldn't be here." A few of the other customers looked away, pretending not to hear. One man awkwardly sipped his coffee, while a woman wearing yoga pants and AirPods gave a tight smile and then returned to her phone. Still, the woman stood there, unfazed. That irritated Evan more. He was used to people reacting. Apologizing. Backing down. Unbelievable, he muttered. People like you just expect handouts. Life doesn't owe you anything, lady. Then, for the first time, the woman moved. Slowly, she stepped forward, close enough that her shadow stretched across Evan's designer loafers. She looked down at him, not with anger, not with hatred, but with something that almost felt like pity. "You think your money makes you better than me," she said softly, calmly. "But money can't buy the things I've earned. You wouldn't last 1 week in my shoes." Her voice wasn't shaky. It was steady. Firm. Full of something deeper than pride, something like truth. Evan scoffed. "Oh really? And what exactly have you earned? Because all I see is someone who gave up." She didn't blink. She didn't raise her voice. She just looked him in the eye and said, "Respect. Strength. And a story that would make your empire look like a sandcastle." That line hit differently. People on the patio who had tried to ignore the exchange were now watching closely. Even the barista inside had paused, pretending to wipe the counter while listening through the open window. Evan's smirk faded just a bit. He leaned forward, curiosity beginning to replace arrogance. "A story?" he said, half mocking but half intrigued. "What story?" She nodded slowly, as if deciding whether to share it. "One you're not ready for," she said. Then, after a pause, "But maybe it's time someone told it." She sat down on the low stone ledge next to the patio and began to speak, not to him, not to any one person in particular, but to everyone and no one at the same time. Her voice was calm. Measured. And somehow, as soon as she started, the world around the coffee shop seemed to slow down. She spoke of ambition. Of a life that began in a small town with nothing but big dreams and bigger drive. She spoke of college scholarships earned, not given. Of nights she worked 2 jobs while studying computer science, of the nights she cried quietly on library floors because rent was due and she hadn't eaten all day. She spoke of building something, a startup that turned into a rising star in the tech world, a company that people believed in. A company she gave her whole soul to. And then, of betrayal. Of a man she trusted. A partner. A friend. Someone she loved. Who took everything they built and left her holding the ruins, alone, bankrupt, blamed, and broken. Evan listened. At first, with arms crossed and a skeptical look. But soon, that look began to shift. His eyebrows narrowed, not with doubt, but with discomfort. This wasn't just a story. This was a mirror. And for the first time, maybe in years, he didn't like what he saw. By now, the other customers had put down their phones. Some leaned forward, others pretended not to listen, but everyone was listening. The woman didn't ask for pity. She didn't ask for anything. She just told the truth. And the truth had power. Evan finally spoke again. His voice wasn't as cocky this time. So what, you just gave up? After all that? She looked at him, not angry, just tired. I didn't give up, she said. I adapted. I survived. While you chased profit, I chased healing. You see a woman with nothing. But I see someone who learned how to lose everything and still stand back up. The silence that followed was deafening. Evan didn't know what to say. For the first time, his mouth opened but no words came out. And in that moment, just for a second, he saw her not as a homeless woman, but as something else. As a teacher. As someone who had walked through fire and was still here. She stood up, dusted off her coat, and looked down at him one last time. One day, she said. When you fall, and you will fall, you'll remember this moment. And maybe then, you'll finally understand what real strength looks like. Then she walked away. No applause. No grand ending. Just the sound of her footsteps fading down the sidewalk. Evan sat there, his cappuccino untouched, the sun now behind a cloud. For once, the man who thought he had all the answers had none. And that was just the beginning. You see a woman on the street. I see the ashes of something beautiful. You think I'm weak. I've never been stronger. 10 years earlier. Before the cardboard signs. Before the dirty coat and street corners. Before the silence of people passing her by. Her name was Anna Rivera, and she had once been a name you'd read in Forbes under 30 lists. The kind of name whispered in startup circles and talked about in conferences, introduced with phrases like visionary, the next big thing, and the woman changing tech from the inside. Anna had always been ambitious, but not in a cold, sharp-edged way like many in the tech world. She believed in building things that helped people. Her startup, NovaMind, was an AI-powered education platform meant to help underfunded schools personalize learning for students with learning disabilities. It wasn't about money for her, it was about impact. But she was smart enough to know that to make real change, she had to play the game. So she did. Anna poured everything into NovaMind. Late nights. Missed birthdays. Microwave dinners at 2 a.m. Her apartment became an office. Her whiteboard was covered in algorithms and sticky notes. She pitched to investors with fire in her voice and hope in her eyes. And people believed in her. Her passion was contagious. One person believed in her most of all, Julian Ward, her co-founder and fiancé. Julian was charming, smooth, and brilliant with numbers. He handled the business side while Anna handled the tech. They were the perfect team. Or so she thought. We're going to change the world, he used to say, brushing her hair behind her ear, the Manhattan skyline glowing behind them. You and me, together. Nothing can stop us. She believed him. At the peak of Novamind's rise, they had just landed their biggest funding round, $8 million from a prominent VC firm. They were scaling fast, hiring engineers, expanding servers, setting up contracts with school districts. And then one day, Julian disappeared. Just like that. Gone. No goodbye. No warning. His phone disconnected. His office cleaned out. The bank accounts nearly empty. The betrayal hit like a freight train. And it didn't stop there. Within days, Anna received a letter, then another. Then a call from a lawyer. Then a freezing of accounts. Then a subpoena. Julian had not only stolen millions, he had used Anna's digital signature to cover his tracks. Everything illegal, everything unethical, had her name on it. And she was left behind to take the fall. The media turned fast. Promising tech star under investigation. Novamind co-founder accused of fraud. From hero to headline. People who once shook her hand now pretended they didn't know her. The investors who praised her brilliance demanded answers. The startup community that once cheered for her now whispered behind closed doors. Anna didn't have the money to fight all the legal battles. And worse, she didn't have the energy. Her heart had been ripped from her chest. She tried to keep going. She took freelance coding gigs. Cleaned Airbnbs under fake names. Waited tables in neighborhoods where no one would recognize her. She sold her furniture, then her clothes, then her laptop. She moved from her loft to a small studio, then to a friend's couch, and eventually, the back seat of her old car. That car became her home for 3 months. Cold nights, hidden in the corner of a Walmart parking lot. A blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Her phone long disconnected. Her resumes sent out in bursts from public library Wi-Fi. She'd sit in that car and think about how quickly it all changed. One day, you're changing the world. The next, the world forgets you exist. You want to know what's worse than being poor, she said, back at the coffee shop. Her voice still calm, but now quieter. Being invisible. Being erased. Watching people who used to respect you pretend they never knew your name. Evan was listening now, not just hearing her, but listening. He didn't know what it felt like to be invisible. He had always been seen. Always been powerful. But something about the way Anna spoke made him uncomfortable. It wasn't just her words, it was the weight behind them. She continued. I worked odd jobs. Cleaned toilets. Washed dishes. I saw people look at me like I was nothing. No one cared about the degrees. The headlines. The truth. To them, I was just another failure. Didn't you try to tell people what really happened? Evan asked. She looked at him. Would you believe a woman with no money, no lawyer, and no voice? Against a man who had millions, charm, and connections. That shut him up. Anna wasn't bitter. That's what made it worse. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She didn't ask for pity. She told her story like someone who had finally stopped running from it. Someone who had accepted her scars and learned to live with them. And then she said something that hit Evan hard. You know what rock bottom really is? She asked. He didn't answer. It's when you stop expecting the phone to ring. It's when you realize the people you helped would never help you back. It's when you look in the mirror and see someone you barely recognize. She paused, took a breath, and looked around the patio. But it's also where you learn who you really are. It's where I found something stronger than success. Stronger than money. I found resilience. I found out that even when you lose everything, you can still wake up the next day and try again. There was something in her eyes now. Not anger. Not regret. Power. Not the kind that comes from wealth or followers. The kind that comes from surviving something that should have destroyed you. Evan didn't know what to say. He suddenly realized he had never experienced real loss. He had always had a safety net. Always had privilege. Always had someone to call, someone to catch him. But this woman? She had been thrown into the fire. And somehow, she walked out of it. For the first time in years, Evan felt small. Not in a humiliating way, just in a human way. Anna looked at him and said, "You don't really know who you are until the world tries to break you. And when it does, you either shatter, or you rise." She stood up, dusted off her coat. "I may not have a job title. Or a corner office. But I know who I am. Can you say the same?" Evan stayed quiet. The city noise returned in the distance. A siren. A honk. A dog barking. But around that coffee shop, it was still. Because no one, not Evan, not the onlookers, not the passers-by, could unhear what had just been said. You're not afraid of failure. You're afraid of being exposed. Because deep down, you know you didn't build everything by yourself. The silence after Anna's story was louder than any noise. Evan Caldwell sat at his table, his half-finished cappuccino now cold, untouched. His phone was still in his hand, screen dim. But for once, he wasn't scrolling. Wasn't checking stocks or emails. He was thinking. Something in Anna's words had gotten under his skin, not just her strength, not just her past, but something more dangerous. Truth. Because the truth she spoke wasn't just about her. It was about him, too. About people like him. About how the world works when no one's watching. He looked around the coffee shop patio. People had gone back to their routines. Some pretended nothing had happened. A few glanced at him, curious, maybe a little judgmental. But no one said a word. Anna had walked away. Quietly. Calmly. Like she hadn't just cracked open a piece of his soul and left it on the sidewalk. Evan sat back, arms crossed, trying to shake off the feeling. But it didn't go away. That night, back in his luxury penthouse apartment, 40 floors above the city, he stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows, holding a glass of scotch. The lights of Manhattan blinked beneath him like stars. Normally, this view made him feel powerful. Tonight, it made him feel small. His assistant had texted him earlier with reminders. Investor dinner at 8. Q3 projections ready for board review. Don't forget Bloomberg interview at 9 a.m. He hadn't replied. He couldn't. Instead, he poured another drink, sat on the edge of his designer leather couch, and Googled something he hadn't expected to search. Anna Rivera Novamind. The articles came up fast. Headlines. Interviews. Photos. There she was, 10 years younger, standing on a TEDx stage, speaking with fire in her eyes. Technology should serve the people who've been forgotten. The ones the system overlooks. If we can build billion-dollar apps for selfies and sandwiches, we can build something for them, too. He clicked through news stories about Novamind's rise, and then its collapse. CEO under fire in fraud scandal. Where is Anna Rivera now? Disgraced innovator vanishes from tech scene. He read every word. Then he read between them. Because something didn't add up. Julian Ward. Anna's ex-fiancé. Gone without a trace. No charges. No follow-ups. No accountability. It was like the world had just forgotten. Evan leaned back. Closed his eyes. He thought about what she had said. You don't really know who you are until the world tries to break you. And when it does, you either shatter, or you rise. He had never truly been broken. Sure, he'd worked hard. Put in long hours. Sacrificed sleep, relationships, peace of mind. But had he suffered? Had he risked everything? No. Not like that. And then the worst question hit him. How much of what I have, did I really earn? His company, SkyPoint Technologies, was thriving. But he hadn't built every part of it. Others had coded the platform. Others had made the first connections. Interns worked for free. Junior staff stayed late. An old friend had introduced him to his first investor. A silent partner had fronted early costs. He made the decisions. Sure. But the foundation? He didn't build it alone. And deep down, he'd always known that. Anna's words echoed again. You don't want to hear that. Because then you'd have to admit that your success was never just yours. And maybe that means your failure won't be either. That hit the hardest. Because Evan was afraid. Not of losing money, he could always make more. Not of starting over, he had resources for that. He was afraid of being found out. Afraid people would realize he wasn't as self-made as he claimed. That maybe he wasn't the genius, the visionary, the empire builder. That maybe, without the money, the suit, and the view, he wasn't that different from the woman on the sidewalk. 2 days later, he returned to the same coffee shop. This time, no suit. No sunglasses. No laptop. Just a man in jeans and a plain jacket, looking for something he couldn't quite name. Anna was there. Sitting on the stone ledge where she had first spoken. Same coat. Same cardboard sign. She saw him coming. Didn't smile. Didn't frown. Just looked at him. Quiet. Still. He walked up, unsure what to say. Finally, he spoke. I looked you up. She nodded. I figured you would. You were incredible, he said, his voice softer than before. You still are. She looked away. Why are you here? He hesitated. Then said something he never thought he'd say. Because. I think I need to hear more. That surprised her. A little. Not just about what happened, he added, but how you survived it. And how you didn't let it turn you bitter. Anna studied him for a moment. Then she said. It did. For a while. I was angry. I hated everyone. I hated myself. But hate is heavy. Eventually, I had to let it go, or it would have buried me. Evan nodded. He understood that more than he wanted to admit. So, what now? He asked. She shrugged. You tell me. Do you want to keep pretending your world is unshakable? Or are you ready to admit that everything we build can fall? He looked down. Then back up. I think I'm ready to stop pretending. She didn't smile. But something in her eyes softened. That day, they didn't become best friends. She didn't move into a penthouse. He didn't write her a check and fix everything. It wasn't a movie. It was real. Messy. Complicated. Human. But for the first time, Evan was seeing the world without the tinted glasses of ego. And for the first time in a long while. He didn't feel like a millionaire. He felt like a man. And maybe, just maybe, that was a start. It's not about what you lose. It's about who you choose to become after the loss. It had been 3 weeks since the day Evan Caldwell sat across from a homeless woman who cracked him open with nothing but her words. Since then, something had shifted. Quietly. Internally. He still had his money. His company. His apartment. But the way he looked at the world, and himself, was no longer the same. He started walking more. Not just for exercise, but to see. He walked past the alleyways he used to ignore. Past the shelters he'd never noticed. Past the tired eyes of people he used to pretend weren't there. And everywhere he went, he saw Anna's face. Not literally, but in spirit. In strength. In stillness. Her story had planted something in him. A discomfort. A mirror. A challenge. At the office, things changed. Evan stopped barking orders. Started asking questions. He stayed late to sit with junior developers. Brought coffee for the receptionist. Took time to actually listen to the team members who once felt invisible in his presence. At first, people were suspicious. Then confused. Eventually, they just started to talk. For the first time, they saw a version of Evan that wasn't untouchable. Wasn't always right. Wasn't trying to be a god. Just a man, trying to be better. But this isn't about Evan's redemption arc alone. Because while he was evolving, Anna's life didn't suddenly become magical either. She was still out there, on the streets, in the cold. Still pushing through each day. Still invisible to most. But something had changed for her too. One afternoon, she received a letter, handwritten, neatly folded, slipped into the paper bag where someone had left a muffin. It simply read. You opened my eyes. I owe you more than I can say. I don't want to fix you, I want to walk beside you. If you're ever ready to build again, I'd be honored to help. Evan. Attached was a business card. But not his usual glossy one with gold lettering and a fancy title. This one was plain. Just a name. And a phone number. Simple. Sincere. She didn't call him. Not right away. Not for weeks. Because Anna didn't want handouts. Didn't want to be a project or a PR stunt. She had rebuilt herself once. She could do it again. But this time, maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't have to do it alone. Eventually, she showed up at his office. Not with a suitcase. Not asking for money. Just holding a notebook. She walked into the lobby like she owned the place. Security tried to stop her, until Evan came out personally, smiling as if he'd just seen a long-lost friend. They sat in the same conference room where he once pitched billion-dollar ideas. This time, she did the talking. It's not charity, she said, opening her notebook. It's a blueprint. I've been sketching something, another idea. Education meets survival skills. Real tools. Real life. Something for people who've fallen through the cracks. Evan leaned in. He wasn't just listening, he was learning. She went on. I don't want your money. I want your resources. Your team. Your platform. And your respect. He nodded. Then said 3 words he never imagined he'd say to her. You lead. I'll follow. They didn't go viral. No articles. No TED Talks. No press release. They simply started building, quietly. Slowly. Together. Evan invested not just his capital, but his time. His name helped open doors Anna had once been locked out of. And her vision? It gave him something he never had before. Purpose. Months passed. The new platform, Second Chance Academy, launched in a pilot program across 3 shelters and 2 halfway houses. Within weeks, the results spoke louder than any marketing campaign. People were learning again. Believing again. Starting again. And all because a man who thought he had it all was willing to be humbled. And a woman the world had forgotten refused to stay silent. One evening, after a long day of work, Evan walked Anna to the subway. They didn't talk much. Just walked in step. Before she disappeared into the station, he said. You were right, you know. She raised an eyebrow. About what? He smiled, tired but genuine. Money can't buy the things you've earned. She smirked. Told you. And then, she was gone, swallowed by the crowd. Evan stood there for a while, watching the city move around him. He used to think success meant rising above everyone else. Now he knew the truth. Sometimes, the only way up, is to reach down and lift someone with you.